I think, funny enough, I think a lot of people, a lot of individuals, like throughout the world, who are like in destabilized countries, they really identify with hip hop because hip hop is almost, in my opinion, extremely. It symbolizes kind of like an underdog, underdog finally rising up and doing something for themselves, like, or not just doing something for themselves, but like being in a way that's unexpected for people who are deemed like oppressed at the bottom, really struggling. I thought about this because somebody had this conversation about Tyler, and he was saying like, oh man, she kind of ruined it, ruined her image by like constantly people had this he said people had this perception about her that like she's just this classic girl from the 90s of R&B. At least that's what it seemed she seemed to come off with her music. And then when she kept talking, people was like, "Oh, she's actually pretty unlikable, actually." But it's like it makes sense, like the place she came from. South Africa. The stuff I've heard, just tertiary stuff. Apartheid, the robbing culture, how safe it seems to be, the fact that they're still descendants of their colonizers, still there that even have a whites only town, like just all these tertiary things. I'm like, yo, this place has got to be destabilized. It's got to be like, kind of like some of the hoods, the ghettos in America. Like, it just got to be crazy. Like you hear a lot of negative stuff about Black Americans and Black Americans. Oh, they just be causing trouble, which is not exactly the truth. But I understand the loud minority really speaks a lot, and like there's individuals who try to speak about their experiences. In addition to, there's also people in the same group that be causing trouble. Um, it's a nuanced conversation, But one thing that I understood is that, like, of course, Tyla would have this materialistic mindset. She came, likely, now I'm making an assumption, but she probably came from a place of like she's a pretty girl, so pretty privilege still works. But it's like, if you're in a place that's pretty destabilized and is without, it makes sense when you get your big break, you're going to be very like holding close to values that escape places are that are away from discomfort, you know. So like there's this term, and I've always been thinking about it. It's from the Bible that like it's kind of like there's three things that'll never happen, and one of those there's two other things I can't necessarily remember, but one of them kind of stood out to me, and that's a slave will never be a king. And at first I thought like, yo, that's kind of crazy, that like why would that ever happen? But in some sense, it's still kind of crazy, but at the same time, it makes sense in some sense. So when you hear people who just live, they live in traumatized places and they don't change, and like they get their big break. You notice this a lot in like hip hop spaces. Not all of them, right? But like you see this in like quite a few where like they say like the hood never left me, or something like I left the hood, but the hood never left me, something like that. But pretty much like um, when you live in such dire circumstances and you have to survive like that, when you move to a different environment, that those habits still are still there. And this is even, in my opinion, when you survive and you get help, like therapy from a good therapist, because there's bad therapists out there, you still have some of those like lingering things that are possibly benefits. Like you hear like from like individuals who survive like the hood and stuff like that, and they go make themselves to be exceptionally successful. It's because what needed them to get out of there is going to take them other places. Another thing could be from veterans, you know, um, when they leave like the service and they go to other places. I can't speak for everybody, but it seems like quite a few of them they just launch off because this isn't necessarily for drama, but like they get what they learn and they apply it somewhere else because they carry the talents they have and they go somewhere with them. So the same thing is kind of like it's kind of similar where, sorry, back to my analogy, is that like um when people leave to a different environment and we had this expectation just because I guess Tyler was this in an image sense and appearance sense that she was just like a classic R&B girl and stuff like that, but she just figure out where she came from. She came from a place of struggle. Now I don't know what her personal family was like, but the stuff I hear from South Africa seems like, yo, it's struggle. it's struggle city. Her place is destabilized. They have a strong post-apartheid uh, uh, situation going on. Folks robbing and stealing, and it's not probably like not everywhere, but like the chokehold is there. I always compare it to like a narcissistic relationship, especially when I was very controlling and stuff like that. But it's a narcissistic relationship, so what else are you gonna get? And you see a person who originally wasn't, and they start being rational. They start responding like a rational person, but eventually, that person gets a chokehold over them, and eventually, the term gaslighting comes into mind. So gaslight, if you understand, gaslighting came from this movie called Gaslight, and it's essentially like this woman. She's like, hey, there's gas. I smell gas. This now, imagine before. I think the husband had it in mind to kind of just kind of play with his woman, his wife's mind. But she says, "Hey, what's going on? You know, I smell some gas." And he says, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." And so this stuff keeps happening until she just loses it. She loses her sense of reality. And so I've never watched it. I actually should watch it, but who knows? But like the concept still applies. Is that like if and another thing is Stockholm syndrome. You know, if you're a captive, they have like the fight or flight, but they also have the other ones. I believe it's secondary responses to fight or flight, which is fawn or freeze, and they have another one called flop. For some reason, these keep popping up, but people have all various like responses to dealing with like immense stress, fight or flight response, and this is the opposite to rest and digest. But like how people deal with certain things is they get tired of fighting, you know, and so I'm not doing a very good job at explaining it, but like once one of the responses is to appease your attacker or your oppressor, so you eventually just fall over, show your belly, and you just try to fawn over this attacker, and you try to smooth things over, just make their situation fine so that they don't blow up anymore, and you just keep doing that. But if you understand about trauma, oh, forgive me, not trauma, PTSD, it's just a condition that is in response to immense trauma or long-term trauma, which could be something dubbed as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is from the ICD-10, that describes basically like emotional flashbacks and having childhood adversity and stuff like that. But like the concept is that you have a certain response to continuous stress and long-term trauma, and you eventually just give in. You got this other thing called battered wife syndrome, where if you're in a controlling situation, you essentially stop having as much agency as you used to, and to the point where you just like, yo, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. You know, you might, but the concept, and even when people describe like how to get out of these scenarios, is not to be like, hey, just get out. It's like, no, they got a mental hold on them, so they can't really get out of it. What they have to do is have that friend just be available and present, and then just kind of like be there, and eventually kind of show availability and a potential to like, hey, there's other options out there. But essentially, from my guess from looking at that, is kind of like you let them know, remind them just by your mere presence. This is why like when narcissists get into a conversation, I'm getting to a relationship with you, they isolate you. So part of it is just kind of reintegrating you back into more voices to re-engage your agency so you can make a decision to leave, and then you go to get some help to actually further re-engage and recover from that controlling and situation where that just took away your agency. You just learn to get your agency back, and you know, you heal, you go through that process of what a therapist will do. But overall, the concept is I believe I'm using a narcissistic relationship, and I'm applying this to a community of people, a collection of people, and that is like, if you know about the concept of apartheid, it is just as systemic as like American systemic racism, stuff like that. But they have a name for it, where it was just like a lot of those things just systematized. And I don't know. I want to say it was everywhere, but I do understand that it was definitely in the South Africa with the Dutch. And so you got newer, like white descendants, called Afrikaans, I don't know if black people could be Afrikaans. I'm not super sure about that, but you see a lot of interesting aspects and responses to living in that scenario. So you got some folks. Um, sorry. So this is why I mentioned different oppressed peoples. They have a identification with rap because black individuals who have created American black music, hip hop inspirations. And this isn't to say other people who come to America who are black didn't contribute. You got Biggie Smalls. He was from, I believe he was born in Jamaica, came here, you know, tried to figure life out, tried rapping because again it was either rap or sell drugs. And they also say play ball, but like, you know, and then he blew up from there, and you know the whole thing with Tupac and stuff like that. But you just have you don't have a lot of options, you know. And so, but at the same time, when you see, not at the same time, people they identify with an underdog who has beat the odds, and that's kind of what the concept of you see various people. Did you know there's a Black Panthers in Israel? Back in the day, there was because if you understand with Jewish individuals, they have like a social hierarchy and different types of Jews, like Mizrahi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, and stuff like that. And some of them understood they was being Beta Israel. Some of them are being mistreated, so they rose up and they created their own Black Panther Party. And I think it could have been in response to seeing the Black Panther Party in America, but they have their own thing. That just I'm just grabbing that, put it to the side, because but people have tried to they identify with blackness and black efforts to show resistance to certain structures. And it's not all white people, of course, you know, but it's like you see it, you know, you see it, and people they get inspiration from it because it's symbolic of like, yo, we were in a bad spot. They were in a bad spot, but they made the best of their situation. They rose, they beat the odds. So I go all the way back to this scenario to go to Tyla, where she probably is from a community in South Africa who has gotten, imagine they had their own style stuff like Amapiano and stuff like that. I don't know a whole lot about South African culture and music and stuff like that. I do know that they are inspired. And so because they're inspired, it makes sense that she came from this, she got inspired from this music. Her music blew up, and again, they're proud people and stuff like that. A lot of Africans are proud people. A lot of people from different cultures are proud people. But it makes sense that, like, if you're from a destabilized, in my opinion, could be wrong, but a destabilized culture, you try to hold on to as much the remaining aspects of the culture that you have, that you can, and it makes sense that people loved her. It makes sense that black people loved her because she just, you know, she. When you come to America, how we view things is not how everybody else view things. Back in the day, it used to be about geography. Today, America is more so about, it's low key class system, but it's kind of like judging by ethnicity. We will call it race, but it's more so kind of like a ethnic hierarchy, class system type of substructure or something like that. And this is different. I mention this because other people will definitely just hear systemic racism in American history and just say, forget all that. It's about nationalism and ethnicity, and that white people, how they view themselves in their particular culture, such as South America, is not like how we would view it. And they'll say, is a difference between nationality and ethnicity. That's just not the point. It's just how we view things is a little different. And so when this Tyler woman comes to America, it makes sense that black people identify with her because, for one, she's inspired by black music, you know, which I always call it a synergy, where African Americans were inspired by African storytelling, help just the primary voices that created hip hop. Parts of Africa became inspired by hip hop, and then created other aspects like Amapiano, you know, and they had their own like rich culture from its various countries, but like it does a back and forth a lot, you know, and this is where you get like Afro beats and stuff like that, and Amapiano and stuff like that. But it makes us that black people, when they seen her come here and or at least blow up in her own country, South Africa, and then come here and it's like, oh yeah, she's a black woman, you know, she identifies, and then you see she's like, nah, not really, you know, but the stuff I've heard from Tyler is that like she's shook up the bee's nest. The bee having has just kind of been an enemy to almost everybody. But I, I I can't, if I think about it psychologically, I can't get too upset because just look at the place she's been in. You know, and like again, it reminds me a lot of African American, um, like our culture. Sorry, I'm looking at my hand. Culture just has a lot of confusion. Confusion. We live in various parts that's destabilized. You know, we have a lot of elements. Some of them contradictory. Some of them we are trying to do our best to uphold and protect and connect. And you know, then you got the Pan African movement. You know, like Marcus Garvey. But like we have a lot of elements and a lot of things going on. A lot of moving parts in Black culture. And when an immigrant comes here, who happens to be Black, and they don't know about all the moving parts that we are a part of and established, and they just say whatever they want. For one, we need to understand their culture, but at the same time, they need to understand ours. And just knowing about the superficial aspects like hip hop and stuff is just not enough. You know, you need to understand. We come here, know about the culture. The same thing is, I would say the same thing for anybody who travels abroad. Know a bit about the culture you're coming to. America is just not just America. Whatever you think is from the movies. It's a multifaceted, multi-ethnic nation full of different people who have come to adopt the American name and become American themselves, but have their own pre-existing history here. So it's like, Tyler can't come in and be like, yo, I don't really care about these individuals here who happen to be Black. And the Black folks can't be like, oh, you just, you're Black too, like us. It's just kind of like, you got to disconnect. And it makes sense why, they was like, I don't like her because she doesn't want to identify with us. It's like, you guys are from two different places. Like, it makes sense that she's not trying to immediately identify. Some of them do. And some of them get rejected by Black American people. Let's be honest, Some people be having thick accents and, they, for them is normal. They in their country, this is normal. But, like, if they come here and they're like, get ragged on by Black teens as a fellow Black teen. Heck, DJ Academics, he came from somewhere. I can't remember though. I do know, what's her name? Amanda Seales. Her mother was from Grenada. But like various different places, and then it's kind of a disconnect, because Black teens and children, they tend to be pretty cruel, so they all point at your differences very fast. And to some African individuals, they feel like some type of way. They're like, man, I thought we were both Black. I thought we were both Black. Why you coming at me like this? And some of them have to adjust. I think Kai Cenat's pops or family is from some African country. I'm not super sure, but like, it could be Haitian. I'm not super sure about all that, but I do know people come here, and there's expectations on both sides. And you hear some Black people say, "Hey, Africans don't like us," and then you hear Africans say, Black people be really clowning us. So there's some disagreements here that can be mended, because we really could use some and I'm not saying we need help in a sense where we just can't handle ourselves. We've definitely been doing this throughout America's history, but at the same time, like, dude, some cohesion, some coalescence is definitely helpful. You see immigrants come here all the time, and then they set up shop very fast because, again, it's hard to enter here, and when you come here, you need money. You don't get here from a free ride. Maybe there's asylum, but like, people come here, they coalesce, they build a community. And I'm always kind of fishy about this concept of like immigrants getting like loan benefits, business loans. I'm not super sure about that. I've heard, but one thing I do know is like you get Chinatowns, you get various communities, and they all speak a similar language, similar if not the same language. So you got kind of like that secrecy, like a soft gate. They don't rock the boat. They slowly build. They take their culture with them, so they have a cultural strong cohesion, and then they just grow, and nobody affects them. There's no extra policing coming around and bothering them. There's no interruption to their growth from the said over policing. They're just slowly growing and building, and then they give them ample opportunity. Another thing is values. If you check out places like Nigerians, they are one of the highest earners. For one, the values, culture is very important. Community building. I still have yet to listen to Claude Anderson's Powernomics. I really do want to, but I keep forgetting. But this stuff is very important. A community building is so important. How many other groups have built their communities, and let alone, sorry, how they was able to build their own stuff. So, one of the things I would love to just see from black people just to coalesce, and it's not to be a racial racist thing where we think we're better. It's not a better thing. It's just more so of a community collaboration thing. Like, you know, it sucks because you see this divide, this difference, and we shouldn't. You know, I always say is that like, yo, the you're children of our ancestors. You know, children of our ancestors. So you like for us to kind of downgrade that. It's just I don't know. It's not right. That's like family. You know, would you downgrade your family because they live somewhere different and then they decide to come here and just talk to you? Like that's not right. You know, this is like if ABC America Born Chinese seen a Chinese immigrant pop by and he ain't trying to show love and say yo what's good, yo come by to this spot, you know, we'll get you some food you understand, you know, and you know that's my guess. I could be wrong, but like you know it's just like let's work out some stuff. You know, I know you hear this new. Let's go. I'm gonna put you on. I'm gonna help you out. My bad. I'm kind of using all these terms, but my point is just like, yo, they make your entry into America smooth and kind of like we should have that. We should have that collectively together. We shouldn't be looking down on each other, you know. And I would encourage black people themselves to just like help usher in this connection, this understanding. I've seen Africans when they finally get it. When they finally understand American history, they're like, "Oh, I get it. Oh, I see. I understand. You guys were dogged out. I get why you guys are where you at. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense." I would encourage black folks to have this cultural exchange and not just make these assumptions. Don't get me wrong. I've seen some Africans be talking crazy. They be talking crazy. They got a lot of negative things to say. But I've also seen some other ones just have some understanding. It's just like, yeah, I understand. You know, I got my life. I got to grind. I got to make it. But I get where you guys are coming from. I get it. You know. And the thing is, just like in some areas, they would kind of get it too. You know, because it's like kind of a one-on-one. Like, you know, we got dogged on by the outsider group, and we are continuously dogged up by our outsider group, or we feel the effects, you know. And it's not to demonize white people. Not all white people doing bad stuff like that. Not all white people are actually a part of the demonization and destabilization of black people. You know, there's good white folks out here. There's good people out here who happen to be white. There's just a whole lot of that. You know, and this is for every other culture as well. But it's complicated because it's also people who don't like us for whatever reason, you know. So let's just be honest. There's some stuff on both sides. My bad. 6, 7. But yeah, essentially, we live in a very complicated age. And when I talk about Tyla, just I don't really know a whole lot about her. But the stuff I hear is kind of like it feels to me that like she came from a place that was hard. Now for all I know, she came from a very nice family, kind of the same deal, you know. Again, and she's trying to be interested in aspects of black culture or her culture. I'm sorry, her culture that was influenced by our culture, but that was influenced by their culture. But like, it's still kind of like a it makes sense why she's the way she is. Like when you're in a place of hard knocks and poverty, you don't want to go back. So you adopt a materialist mindset, especially here in America, where that's kind of a common thing, where it's just like go get money, like get out the streets, get out the hood, get out. You know, that's just popular culture, and it's like poverty. Not everybody's poor. That's what I mean. It's just like it's a gradient to how everybody's lived, but like popular culture does include hip hop, which does include like those who made it and those who use their experiences to show, hey, like we had a hard time living in like certain communities that was like concentrated poverty, and then we had to fight, and then how I got out was through hip hop and rap, like the Biggie story I was talking about. Like this stuff happens. It happens. So we have a lot going on here. You know, you may not notice. You know, if you go to the World Cup, you see people like, "Wow, it's just so nice," and it is nice. In some places, it's very nice. It's beautiful. America has a lot of beauty to it. I know we are so obsessed with Japan and this and the third, and they have their own beauty too. But like, when you come to America, you see so much. Especially we got Africa. I mean, sorry, different word. Alaska. You know, we got Hawaii. We got like Colorado. We got Texas. We got all the 50 states, and they all got something interesting about them. It's in my opinion, it's almost like moving to a different country. You go to a different state. It's just the likelihood of you seeing something different every time is almost you see it. It's like always different things where you go. And I haven't been in every state, but like you notice it, and maybe that's different. Some places are just more different than others, but you notice it. But yeah, I think that's it. I think we need to better understand people. I don't know Tyler or nothing like that. I don't know, but I think she would do better to maybe better explain, maybe better understand, get us to understand where she came from to have this mindset. And maybe not. Maybe she's just rich and she's just like bought into the lifestyle. It's like, yo, I just want the money. I just want the Chanel. I want all that stuff. I just want it. You know, and maybe it's just something deeper. I'm just kind of helping us explore deeper, a means to connect a little deeper. So hopefully we could do that. If not, it is what it is. People got work at the end of the day tomorrow, so we all have to make a way. But my hope is that we can just come together, and my greater hope is that America can finally settle and wrestle through its problems, so we can finally move to classism and work that out. But I'm expecting that to happen maybe 30, 50 years from now if we can actually do the work. And if we do the work, then that'll happen much sooner. But like, if Singapore can do it, we should be able to do it. But that had its own circumstances as to how that happened. But anyway, that's all I got. I'll see y'all later. Bye.